Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2013. May I have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Anderson? Mrs. Fisher? Here. Mr. Schuler?
Here.
Mrs. Clemenson?
Here.
Mr. Borkowski?
Here.
Mr. Lemke?
Here.
Mr. Folker?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, we're going to begin with the President's report, and the President, Bill Anderson, is not here this evening. He's unable to attend. In his absence, myself, Leslie Fisher, will conduct the meeting as Vice President. And something briefly that I wanted to share that many of us, whether in the audience or at home, may not be aware of is, as we all know, we're hearing of many changes in our curriculum and the Common Core being adopted and some of the ways in which perhaps math programs are changing especially. And something I wanted to encourage here, if we are looking in our Friday flyers for DPM East and DPM West, these services have been offered for a couple of years, but they are being offered, continue to be offered this year. We have Math Resource Center, which is offered on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays after school from dismissal through 5 p.m. Math Resource Center is actually a brilliant partnership between Lake Forest High School students who come to DPM West and are available to tutor 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students in math. Mrs. Paul, who is a 7th grade teacher, chairs the program and runs it in conjunction with the high school. And the high school students do this as part of their community service hours. I can tell you firsthand, it's had a great benefit to my own children, and I've heard of several children benefiting from this. So when I encounter parents who feel like, well, in the midst of these changes, we are seeking out tutoring, I would recommend that this be a first stop. That is the Math Resource Center. In addition, Homework Club is also held at DPM East and DPM West on both sides of the building. You would have to check your DPM Friday flyer to know specific times in classrooms, but certified teachers are there on hand to help with homework, I believe Monday through Thursday, every day after school from about dismissal until 5 p.m. So I just wanted to mention those two programs in case people in our school communities were not aware of them. Thank you. We are going to continue now with the superintendent's report. Mr. Simic?
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher, and it's going to be a busy night for Mrs. Leafman. I'd like to ask her first to speak to our task force for the food service, if she would.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this tonight. So we're looking forward to gathering collaboratively with members from the Food Service Committee, Wellness Committee, members from the hospital, dietitians from the hospital, to look at our food service and overall wellness programming. Our charge is to establish program criteria, looking at our nutrition standards, looking at financial viabilities, looking at the collaboration among a variety of standards, looking at dietary accommodations that we provide for students, being flexible, meeting their dietary needs, nutrition education, and school initiative partnerships. And we're hoping to come back in December to the board meeting here and make recommendations. What we have found is we don't have standards to measure our programming up against, and so we're excited to take a deep dive into what state and federal standards look at programs along the North Shore, and see how ours compares to that, and come back with recommendations in December.
Thank you, Mrs. Leafman. I'd also like to express our thanks to the hospital who have volunteered to lend their dietitians to this work, and they've been eager to do so. I really appreciate that.
I should also mention too, parents are going to sit on that. We'll have representation from the schools too. That's a huge piece. So we're excited to partner.
Good. Thank you. And Mrs. Clemenson, would you be able to provide an update on the mission, vision, and goals for us?
As we talked about last month, we are embarking in a mission, vision, and goals project that is going to involve all of us in the community, led by the board. Right now, we're in the process of screening vendors, and we have been fortunate to have a variety of folks that have submitted proposals, and we've now narrowed it down to 2 vendors, and we're going to be having face-to-face meetings with them in the next 2 weeks. And as soon as we choose who we're going to be partnering with, we'll get back to you with more details. But as I said last month, this is going to be a fun project that we hope will involve all of our stakeholders to kind of set a new course for the district moving forward.
And it bears repeating how fortunate we are to have Mrs. Clemenson to lead this work with us. Brings a wealth of experience and resources to this, and also a lot of enthusiasm. So really very, very well done. One of the things I wanted to report on was this is the 30-day enrollment period that has now passed, and one of the things that we did this past week was with our partners in the LFEA, we took a look at our class sizes across the district. Our enrollment has got a very positive trend to it. We thought we were going to have quite a dip this year. As it turns out, we've had a robust enrollment of new students across the district, and we have a slight decrease overall in district enrollment. Our class sizes, as we like to say, are the envy of the world, and we have very desirable class sizes across the district, which we intend to maintain. So we're in very good shape there. I'd like to thank the LFEA for their partnership and the work that we do together so often on that topic and others. I also like to express our congratulations to Mrs. Sostra and the cross-country team. Our cross-country team won the state championship this past weekend, placing 4 students in the top 10 in the state. And if you don't run, it's okay. That never happens. And they're going to join us at our November meeting. Mrs. Sostra has been kind enough to agree to bring some of her students with her. And finally, the Spirit Luncheon was this past week. Later on, there'll be a word on that. And this is a tour de force of our parent volunteers, very much like putting on a wedding. It is 250 mostly ladies. I think there were 2 other men and I in the crowd, and an amazing event with terrific turnout, a great fundraiser, and impressive in every way, and they set a very high bar for us to try to live up to as administrators, and very thankful for their work for our district and especially for our students.
Thank you, Mr. Simic. I would like to echo the sentiment as well on behalf of myself and the rest of the board. Beth, thank you for the time you've already put in and for your leadership as we embark on this very exciting journey. And I do believe that this is the only state championship title that we hold at DPM thus far. That's what I've heard. So very excited for the cross-country team and for our entire district. Okay, now we reach public participation. This part of the meeting is an opportunity for us to hear directly from parents, taxpayers, students, and other citizens whom we are privileged to serve. It is also an important opportunity for community members to address the board directly. Issues and concerns raised during this part of the meeting are very important to us. Accordingly, they will be taken under advisement so that a proper response can be made in a timely fashion. For those who opt for public participation, the time limit is 3 minutes. I respectfully request that you remain within those 3 minutes. Thank you. Would anyone like to approach the podium? Seeing as none, we will move on to the next step, which will be the reports and discussions. And Mr. Simic?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fisher. And I'd like to ask Mrs. Leafman to come and again let us know about our wellness initiative.
Good evening, Mr. Simic, members of the board. Thank you very much for having me tonight. I recently watched a TED Talk by Ramzi Musalam. Mr. Musalam is a chemistry teacher who shared his belief that there are 3 rules to spark education. And I believe these same rules apply as we enter into our 6th year of our emotional wellness journey. First is curiosity comes first. I'm deeply curious about what else is possible on our journey. How else can we integrate social, emotional, character development skills into all that we do? How do we know we are making a difference? 2, don't be afraid of the mess. This work can be messy. We're dealing with skills such as self-management, relationships, and conflict. And we have to dive into the mess if we want to equip our students, staff, parents, and community with skills of character and competence. 3 is practice reflection. This is so critical for growth. Time to think and process. This is something we have been intentionally weaving into meetings, class lessons, and events. I continue to be humbled and grateful for the commitment the school board, APT, school staff, and community leaders have for this work. It is without a doubt what is right and good for our students in helping them to achieve school and life success. Our work continues to be grounded in our character traits of teamwork, caring, honesty and integrity, respect and responsibility. Because of the unending commitment and partnership, we are able to grow. It can be challenging to keep all stakeholder groups energized the deeper we dive into this work, and it certainly takes stamina and grit of the collective whole to power such important work. We know that learning is a social process. In the latest research, it is reinforced that children do not learn in isolation, but rather in collaboration with teachers and other adults, in the company of their peers and with support of their families. This is where character and competence, the skill sets, come in. Social emotional learning is defined by experts as a process of acquiring those skills, to recognizing and managing emotions, developing caring and concern for others, establishing positive relationships and making responsible decisions, and handling challenging situations effectively. We often think of it in terms of the head, the heart, and the hands. Knowing, feeling, and demonstrating the social and emotional skills that allow us to profit from and contribute to a learning environment. So what does that look like? I'd like to share a few examples. One is the adoption of the life skills curriculum in 6th grade health class that is research-based and aligned to the intentional teaching of social-emotional learning skills that includes prevention of risky behaviors. Additionally, we have community service projects happening at the elementary and middle schools that naturally infuse social-emotional learning skills throughout the process of each project. This past September, 25 staff members were trained in Capturing Kids' Hearts, which is a learning experience that provides tools for administrators, faculty, and staff to build positive, productive, trusting relationships among themselves and with their students. One outcome includes developing safe, trusting, self-managing classrooms, all of which can transform the classroom and school environment, paving the way for high performance. We continue to have strong partnerships also with our parents through the APT, Emotional Wellness Committee, and Parent Awareness roles. Because of this partnership, we work collaboratively to provide programming, resources, and information that align with the District Emotional Wellness Initiative. We're making changes in the broader community as well with groups like 50 Strong and the Community Wellness Task Force. So are we making a difference? Our survey data indicates that we are. Our annual Culture and Climate Survey contains 34 items that are clustered into 4 categories: student understanding of rules, adult-to-student relationships, student sense of safety, and student-to-student relationships. We've been administering the survey since 2008, and we continue to make steady progress. The survey offers an important glimpse into student perceptions and experiences of the school environment. Students continue to report a strong sense of safety and understanding of rules. What research tells us is when students feel safe and cared for, their attachment to school and teachers increases. As a result, students want to come to school and are willing to work hard to learn and produce work that wins their teachers' approval. Additionally, when students feel attachment to their school and teachers, high-risk behaviors decrease. We do have some opportunities for growth, which include adult-to-student relationships and student-to-student relationships. The tools learned in capturing kids' hearts, we believe, will have a direct positive impact on these two areas. Our discipline data at the middle school is also indicative of progress made. For example, we are seeing an increase in the number of students with 0 incidents of misbehavior that require administrative attention and a decrease in the percentage of students with 1 or more than 1 incidence of misbehavior. Before I go on to the other areas, the chart indicates our years of surveying students. And the top line is the most recent data, the spring 2013. So as a trend, we can see that from 2010, and I just have from 2010 to 2013 on here, we are making steady improvements, and our trends are similar across each category setting, which helps us to say our survey is valid. In addition to the data, though, Character Education Partnership, a national advocate and leader for the character education movement, is recognizing us for a Promising Practice Award. We submitted an application last spring titled Building a Community of Character and highlighted the structure in which we are embracing social emotional character development. We highlighted aspects of our initiatives such as having a district level committee, building-based committees, and strong school and community partnerships. We shared our story of the strong commitment we have to building character and competence for our students, staff, parents, and community. Additionally, last spring, we submitted a proposal to present at the 69th Annual ASCD Conference and Exhibit Show among the likes of Daniel Pink and Sir Ken Robinson. ASCD is the global leader in developing and delivering innovative programs, products, and services that empower educators to support the success of each learner. Our proposal was accepted, and Joe Moline and I will be presenting our structure for building and sustaining a community of character. I share this as a celebration of the efforts it has taken all of us to get to where we are, and to reiterate the need to continue to make this work a priority if we want to see continued growth and benefits for our students and community. As you can see, it takes many partnerships and a true spirit of shared leadership to prepare our students for school and life success. At this time, I'd like to invite John Torelli, Sheila Falls from Mrs. Miyamoto's 3rd grade Explore class at Sheridan, and Morgan Kamholtz, Sue Yardimsey, and Andrew Walther from Deer Path Middle School under the direction of Mrs. Kristen Tiveron to share how they are leading the charge at their schools.
Were you ever an upstander when you saw someone getting bullied or treated unfairly? You were probably wondering, what is an upstander? We didn't even know what it was until we read an article in Time for Kids about Unity Day.
We found out that on Unity Day, everyone unites against bullying by wearing orange and reflecting on bullying prevention. This article taught us that an upstander is a person who helps someone who is getting bullied by standing up for him or her. But a bystander is someone who stands by watching and may or may not do anything to help.
When we read this article, we thought Sheridan should observe Unity Day too. In math, we looked at the school-wide behavior support survey from last spring and noticed that the kids at Sheridan rated student treatment of others the lowest.
Our class wrote a proposal to our principal, Dr. Shin, saying we read an article, looked at the survey, and wanted to set up Unity Day on October 9th at Sheridan to help improve student treatment of others.
She liked the idea, so we started planning. We wrote scripts for the morning announcements to teach Sheridan about upstanding and bystanding as well as the meaning of the word unity, and to share facts about bullying.
We also made posters to hang around the school to advertise Unity Day and remind everyone to wear orange.
All of these classes participated, and now the chain is on display in the entry way at Sheridan near the office. We also gave teachers a list of suggestions for fun extension activities, such as creating skits or songs. When our class talked about Unity Day after it was over, I shared that a girl had bullied me and my friend. But after Unity Day and all of the activities that we did, she stopped bullying me. That made me happy to know that we changed a bully's ways.
When I came to school on Unity Day and saw people were wearing orange, I was surprised to see that people actually listened to us on the announcements and saw our posters in the hallway. This showed me that kids could be very effective leaders.
We think it is so cool that a group of third graders could make a difference in our school. Thank you.
I'm Sue, and I'm from Deer Path, and I'm an 8th grader. This past September, 40 8th graders from Deer Path Middle School participated in a youth summit with other 8th graders from our community. One topic we wanted to focus on was bullying prevention. We invited Mrs. Robinson, the APT Emotional Wellness Parent Representative for DPM and Sheridan, to share more about an organization called PACER. PACER is the founder of National Bullying Prevention Month and Unity Day, held annually in October. We believed Unity Day was a great way for us to show our support for bullying prevention.
I'm Morgan, and I'm also an 8th grader at Deer Path. And in the days leading up to Unity Day, we tied orange ribbons around the trees to start sending our message, and we asked the student body, what are your true colors when it comes to bullying? If we care about students who are bullied and want bullying to end, we should make our color orange on Unity Day. That's the day everyone can link together in schools, communities, and online and send one large orange message of support to students who have experienced bullying. On Tuesday, October 8th, we stopped by homeroom classes to inform our fellow student body about Unity Day. On Wednesday, October 9th, we encouraged everyone to wear orange to support students who have experienced bullying and to unite on the belief of creating bully-free communities. Before school, Unity Day stickers were handed out, and during lunch, orange friendship bracelets were distributed. Our work paid off, and people showed their support and still wear their friendship bracelets.
My name is Andrew Walther. I'm also in 8th grade at Deer Path. The Youth Summit group is going to continue to meet monthly to decide our next steps. We want to explore the idea of Unity Day thoroughly and want to see what else we can do to create a more fair, optimistic, safe, and trusting and supportive environment for all the students at Deer Path. We hope that next year the legacy of Unity Day is carried on throughout the future of the school years and celebrated annually. Thank you so much for listening and providing us the resources to make this a success at Deer Path. Thank you.
Thank you for continuing to partner with us and join us as we apply those 3 rules to spark our journey. Curiosity comes first. Don't be afraid of the mess, and practice reflection.
I would like to thank all of you for being the leaders in our schools. Very important. Thank you very much, and congratulations. All right, now, any questions from the board for Mrs. Leifman?
Rebecca, thank you, first of all. And the students, you guys were fantastic as well. I love what you're doing, and Rebecca and I sort of work sometimes outside of this board as well. So I love what you're doing, and you know that. And there's great progress that you reported, and clearly the student treatment of others is the lowest category, and there's a lot of programs working on that. And I think your data is perfectly correlated with the Illinois Youth Survey data. we're doing a lot of good things, but bullying, I'm using that term very loosely, definitely still exists. Are there things that we, the board, or the other administrators here can do? I think you're doing a fantastic job, and sometimes I think you're one person, and this is a bigger job than one person. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but are there things that we generally in this room can do to support you better?
You know, offhand, the first thing that came to mind was just that continued support, and that that although we've come pretty far, that one thing that we're very aware of on the district committee and the building level committees is not to rest on our laurels of where we are, because there's still a lot of work to do. And I feel confident because we've gotten so much support from the board, from the Spirit, from APT, that just to continue that and be open as we make continued improvements and growth, and to trust the process, because it is a slower process, and it's not just about one program or another program and a silver bullet that's going to make everything better. I wish it was, but it's not. And when I've researched and when we've looked at other schools, national schools of character, who are fully embracing, and that's what we're trying to do, is have a full embrace, not just adopt a program here and there. It takes time, and it's a constant cycle of reevaluating what we're doing and remaining curious, and keeping that stamina and that grit, and not letting the plates fall, so to speak, but keeping them all going with a lot of passion, and that's happened thus far. So I trust that it'll continue to happen.
I'm ecstatic with what happened with Unity Day. It's fantastic coming out of the Youth Summit, and I'm particularly pleased that it went down to one of the elementary schools, and I would encourage sort of everyone that it's not just a problem in middle school, it starts at the elementary school. And so doing it at Sheridan's fantastic. Doing it at Cherokee and Everett would have been even more fantastic. So I would encourage everyone to really start at the lower grades, because it all just works its way up into the middle school.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Simic?
Yeah, first, every time I hear our students speak, I'm floored. You guys are so articulate, and you present well, and obviously you come from caring homes that help your teachers as well. You guys just do a terrific job. Thank you very, very much. For Mrs. Leafman, one of the things that can easily go unnoticed here is that people take this kind of work for granted and think that it occurs everywhere. Mm-hmm. And after decades in this industry, I can tell you that there are very few schools that devote the kind of attention to this, to emotional wellness of their students, and then also track this so carefully. I mean, there's a precipitous drop in bullying, and a really, really strong rise in the number of students who have no disciplinary incidents at all, and that's tracked over time. One of the things this past year, and I can take no credit for this, this is just an acknowledgement of work well done, is the Capturing Kids' Hearts, and you're devoting some of the late start time to take this from 2 small groups now that have participated in this, and to try to systematize this across the grade. It looks like there's data that indicates that the Emotional Wellness Initiative is working. Can you talk about those late start days and how those will be used to spread that across the buildings?
Sure. Well, we're thrilled that from administration to staff that it has been fully embraced, and I think that's happened because it was a slow rollout, that we did our research and sent study teams to see if this is something that we wanted to adopt. And so the teachers that have gone have shared such passion and enthusiasm about this that in working with administration, they've created their late start day, that program, that professional development program, to share this with the entire staff, with their teaching teams, knowing that when everyone's on the same page and speaking the same language, that's when we see the biggest benefits. And so I'm really excited to see how it unfolds. there's a lot of energy. Going back to shared leadership, you know, and Mr. Burkowski's comment about it can't just be one person. Absolutely, it can't, and it's not. And that, to me, is the most exciting piece, is that there are groups of staff members and administrators kind of picking the ball up and running with it to give the professional development to the whole. So.
Thank you very much. And our first late start is tomorrow.
Yep.
Very timely. Very happy about that. Okay, now we are going to move on to board committee reports. And the first board committee report is the Education Committee. And the Education Committee did not meet in the past month, but we will be meeting again on November 19th. The next committee I'm going to call on is Finance and Operations. Mr. Schuler?
Yes, Finance and Operations also did not meet in the last month. I expect we'll meet sometime in November.
Thank you. Finally, the Policy Committee. Mr. Borkowski?
The Board Policy Committee met on October 16th at 10:45. Present at the meeting were Jeff Volker, Bill Anderson, Mike Semick, Andy Hendrickson, Alan Albus, Jen Hermes, Eileen Fowler, and myself. We talked about two main topics. The first topic was the creation of a compensation committee as a standing board committee. This had gone through a first reading at the August board meeting. Numerous perspectives were discussed, including a desire by board members for more research on salary bands, more in-depth analysis on compensation-related issues, wanting to avoid conflicts with staff preparing superintendent comps, and more timely reporting of info to the board before we vote on matters. Other perspectives included concerns that the committee would be stepping into operations and a question of how often this work needed to be done. Was it a one-time project or an ongoing need? After discussion, a consensus of our best thinking developed around creating a special board committee to deal with compensation policy issues, with unanimous agreement that this was the best path for us to follow. When this committee has completed its stated work, it would provide a readout to the board, and we will then determine if it should transfer to a standing committee or if it should be disbanded. We had initially discussed having a first reading of this idea, and that appears on the agenda as an action item, but upon further review, it was determined that no actual policy change is required to create a special committee. If we did a standing committee, we'd change the policy. A special committee is not actually changing the policy. The board president has the authority to create a special board committee at any time per policy 2:150, and therefore he can create this committee immediately. Nonetheless, we want input from all the board members, so at the end of the report, I'm going to ask all the board members for their comments on the creation of this special committee. The second topic we discussed at the policy committee meeting was regarding 6:40 on how innovative educational programs and pilot projects are created, and what, if any, board involvement is familiar with it. I'm going to, just for everybody's information, hand out a copy of that policy, and Cornelius is going to graciously put that on the projector for everyone to see. This section currently covers the creation and oversight of pilot programs, including the first sentence, the superintendent may recommend innovative educational programs and/or pilot projects for board consideration. The committee discussed various perspectives here as well. On one hand, neither the board nor the admin team wants to restrict innovation or creativity, and if we're too rigid with the policy, we could end up in that place. On the other hand, everyone agrees that the board has an extremely important oversight role, which cannot be minimized. The board owns curriculum decisions per the IASB and all major initiatives that affect the district. Finding that balance and defining what needs to be brought to the board and what does not require that degree of scrutiny is something that we wrestled with. We discussed some of the words in the first sentence, if it should be consideration, if it should be approval, if it should be may, if it should be will. We discussed what other aspects of the policy were being followed, because there's a lot in the policy, and we used the Mandarin program as an example. The existing policy details a number of items which must be presented to the board, including things that you can read, which I won't read to you. As a group, we decided not to rush to make a decision on this topic, but rather we're going to continue this discussion at our next policy meeting, which will likely be in November. The hope is that with additional time to consider and discuss, we might discern a more optimal answer, and I expect to report the results of that conversation at our next board meeting. The meeting adjourned at 12:15, and the next policy committee meeting has not been set, but it'll likely be in mid-November. That concludes the formal policy committee report. I'd like to ask Jeff Folker if he has anything to add, and then I'd like to get comments from all the board members regarding the creation of the special committee related to compensation, which we intend to create.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It was a very good discussion with all those present from the administration as well as Mike, Bill, and myself. And I am in support of the creation of a special board committee to look at compensation. I think the work needs to be done, but we did reach the agreement that at least at the moment, it's not something that we need a standing committee that's going to be doing this every year, meeting quarterly. So I support the creation of the special board committee to do that work.
So I'd love other comments. I promised Mr. Lemke that I would call on him first tonight, so I guess I'll start there.
I support the creation of a compensation committee. I think it's a good idea, and I think this is the right result in the end.
I do as well. I've had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Borkowski as well as Mr. Anderson about the conversation and dialogue that went on at this meeting, and I feel that this is a great compromise of a decision, the special committee, and I think it will enhance the opportunity for the board to do its work while the administration does theirs.
I too am happy with this. I think it reflects sort of the compromise position that I was looking for as well. It's more of a informational research, recommendations, guidelines, but not a subgroup that decides on specifics. So I think it's in good shape.
Anybody else? Mrs. Clemenson?
I feel like Mike's looking at me until I say something. You know, I really appreciate that Mr. Anderson gave us a month to kind of mull this over and really clarify our thinking on this, because I do feel like you guys ended up in a really good place that, as you well put, Mrs. Fisher, you know, it's a good combination of meeting multiple objectives, so nice job.
And thank you to Mr. Borkowski and Mr. Folker on their work here. Moving along, we now will go to the portion of our meeting that where board members who are liaisons report on meetings. Mr. Borkowski, back to you on the NSSED.
We need to change the order because I always go twice in a row. So, the NSSED Governing Board last met on October 9th. At this meeting, a number of issues were presented, but the most important to the District 67 Board is that the notification by the North Shore District 112 of their intent to withdraw from the NSSED. North Shore District 112 is the K-8 district in Highland Park. It's the biggest K-8 district in NSSED, and it represents about 10% of NSSED. To be clear, they have not yet actually given formal notice, but that's expected to occur before the end of this calendar year. There's an 18-month notice requirement, which means they could exit NSSED prior to the start of the 2015-16 school year. The reason given for their intent to withdraw was financial. The effect of their potential withdrawal from NSSED is quite significant, especially in light of some of our own discussions on the costs associated with NSSED. The obvious impact is that the fixed costs of NSSED would then be spread among fewer member districts, resulting in higher cost for all. At the board meeting, I strongly encourage the governing board and NSSED superintendent and admin team to aggressively seek ways to transform the organization, to continue providing outstanding programs and services, but in a more cost-effective manner. And I stress that a sense of urgency is needed. If District 112 does withdraw, lacking a change in structure, a domino effect could easily occur, leaving NSSED in an extremely vulnerable position. One other member of the governing board, Dr. Ed Tivador, who's the superintendent from Northbrook Glenview District 30, was equally outspoken on the topic, stating the need for, quote, a transformation, not smaller incremental thinking, unquote. My sense is this topic is known and understood by the NSSED board, but there may be a desire to avoid the topic, as it's either a messy topic or a lot of work, depending on your perspective. I was informed by a fellow board member after the meeting that this entire topic had been, quote, the elephant in the room for a long time that we generally dance around. My recommendation to our group and the admin team in particular is that is that the administration team examine this issue closely to understand what next steps, if any, we may want to take. In order to maximize our position relative to the 18-month notice period, the analysis and discussion with the NSSED staff should really occur by the end of this calendar year or early in January 2014. Once the 18-month notice period includes the start of the 2015 academic year, it effectively becomes a 24-month or more notice period, as it's really unlikely and difficult to withdraw during an academic year. The next NSSED Governing Board meeting is on December 11th. The other part that I want to discuss tonight, and Cornelius is going to put this on the projector, and I'm going to hand this out as well. At our last board meeting, I did request from NSSED a summary of the costs to District 67 and the services we receive. And I want to briefly share that with the board now, provide a real quick overview of the major items that we received for the money we paid. We also discussed having the NSSED superintendent attend a board meeting for a more in-depth discussion. I thought it made sense for us first to see the cost summary and understand the District 112 intent to withdraw, and then if we feel that we want to have the superintendent at our next meeting, we can certainly do that. So if we look at this summary sheet, there's a few quick highlights I'll mention. Our district paid about $1.2 million out of pocket to NSSED for services, which include the following major items. A membership fee that you see at the top of the chart of approximately $27,000. We have 9 students receiving their full-time instruction at NSSED facilities. There's a few different ones, and that was approximately $347,000. If you move down about halfway down, there's a cost of $201,000, and that's for 58 students which receive either PT or OT services in our District 67 school buildings. That equates to about 1 full-time OT and about 7/10 of a full-time equivalent PT. And then further down under contracted services, you see a cost of $626,000. That is a total of almost 17 full-time equivalent teaching aides in our building under our administration supervision. They're actually employees of NSSED, but they work in our buildings. In addition to what's on the chart, we also receive about $500,000 from the IDEA grant, which is federal funds distributed through the states. This money gets paid directly to the NSSED, as is the case with most districts in a special ed co-op. NSSED has a 70-30 split. They pay about $350,000 of that $500,000 to District 67, and they keep the remaining approximately $150,000. So if you include the IDEA funds, our total cost to NSSED is about $1.4 million for the services that I just mentioned. That concludes the NSSED report, but I'm happy to answer questions from the board and the public, and I'd really also like to get a sense from the board if we would like the superintendent of NSSED to come to a future board meeting or some other type of meeting.
To clarify, and thank you so much for presenting this information. I don't know about the rest of everyone, but I do believe that NSSED, at least since I've been on the board, is sort of just the thing that we don't know enough about. At least you do because you're at the meetings. And now certainly, years ago, we had thought about perhaps pulling out of NSSED. That was when Rick and I came on years ago. And now we're sort of looking at the same thing. Now, one thing before you say anything, Mike, you said 1.4 million total, and if I'm looking here, do we have under 70 students who use this program this year?
We have 9 students going to their facilities full-time instruction.
Correct.
We have 58 students in our buildings receiving some therapy ranging from a little to a lot. And we have 17 FTE TAs. That 17 is actually broken down. We have 1 full-time speech path, and we have 21 actual physical TAs, some part-time, some full-time. It equates to about 17 FTE. So we have 9 full-time students, 58 students getting some level of service, and 17 full-time equivalent TAs.
So estimated 85 students receive some type of servicing through NSSED as of right now.
I'm not sure it's as simple as that. We have 58 plus 9, we have 67 actual students receiving some direct service, and then we have sort of a amorphous large number that get impacted by the TAs. Those TAs are not necessarily one-on-one TAs. And you nor I necessarily, on a daily basis, we don't necessarily know who they are. They may be a TA in your class or my class.
And we can utilize them as throughout our schools.
I defer to somebody on the admin who might know more than me, but I believe the answer is yes. They're under our supervision.
There is, and it's just interesting to know what you're looking at is 1213, because there's actually been a little bit of a shift, and many of those TAs are now our employees. And that really is a financial calculation, but also having a little bit more control over what those specific TAs are responsible for and how we utilize them in the classroom. It's really three components, and we reviewed this 2 years ago with Dr. Cooley leading the charge. It's really what we call a membership fee. Okay, so that's up front, not mattering how many students you have in the program, fees for services, and then how much of our idea funds they're keeping. And if you recall, those are the three components that changed as a result of, I think, our interest in potentially withdrawing due to financial reasons 2 years ago. That was a 60-40 split, which is now a 70-30. So we are keeping more of our idea funds. The membership fee based on our EAV and our district size has decreased, and the amount for services actually went up, which is actually placing more of the burden on those that are higher users of the program. So that's how the pendulum kind of swung a little bit back in our favor.
Yeah, and I would absolutely echo that. And that came up at the board meeting. It actually came up in perhaps not a little bit of revisionist history about our stance. So we filed to withdraw about 2 years ago, and I wasn't here at the time, but as I understand it, largely as a result of that pressure, negotiation, call it what you want, caused what Jennifer just talked about, changing from the 60-40, 70-30. As Dr. Tivador said, and his quote was, the natives are restless. There are a number of districts around the table. There's 17 districts in NSSED. There's a number of them that are happier with 70-30 than they were with 60-40, but there's a number of them that are saying it's not enough. So when I suggest that we examine this and have any discussions we want between now and early January, we're not alone with that. There are other districts doing that, and if we desire that to change, some more formal pressure, I can do it at the governing board level, but we may want to do it at some other levels as well. Now is kind of the time if that's something that we want to pursue.
Just one more comment on that, because if you think about how a formula works and how, if there's 17 districts, unless there's a fundamental change in the cost structure, then it's really just a shift. So there's winners and there's going to be losers every single time you make a formula change, unless something fundamentally changes in your expense structure. So I think those are the discussions that perhaps Mike is referring to.
With 112 leaving, they're the biggest K-8 in NSSED. The structure is going to change, and lacking some sort of other transformation, it's going to change in the wrong way.
Does that mean it gets 10% more expensive for those left, or does the cost structure change? In theory, you would hope it would.
In theory, you would hope it would.
But what's your feel for how it actually may come out?
I don't think it's 0 or 10. There's a reduction in students, and so there will be some reduction in staff and some reduction in costs. I don't think it'll be a wash.
It's lumpy, if nothing else.
Yes, right? It's absolutely lumpy. So I don't think that it's going to be a 10% increase, but I absolutely know that it's not going to be a 0% increase. As I mentioned, I get the sense, you asked for my sense, the NSSED administration is very, very proud of their programs, and they should be. I haven't been in this role very long, but from what I've seen, the programs and services are outstanding. And they're proud of that, and they should be. I don't get a great sense that they necessarily are eager to change the cost structure. And I get a very strong sense that it needs to happen, or one of the likely outcomes could be really bad. 112 leaves, and there's a handful of others that are considering it, 1 or 2 leave, and it becomes a house of cards that could really implode on itself.
But in the analysis that was done a couple years ago, we decided it was still more cost-effective to use NSSED than bring it in-house, correct? Obviously?
I think it was a combination. I mean, we got to an acceptable financial point where we still felt the value of their services kind of was worth it at that point. We were getting a lot more money returned to our district, and there are still programs that we might not necessarily be able to bring back in-house, so we still would be paying for those somewhere. So it was, I think, a very nice position. There was significant cost savings to both 67 and 115 with this change in formula.
Are we at a point, though, that any change in that balance does force us to re-examine?
Depends how the balance tips.
Jeff, my recollection from 2 years ago is the conclusion wasn't that NSSCD could do it cheaper than we could. In fact, it was possibly the opposite. This isn't something I could back up, but this is what we were told at the time. And we pushed and got better results. You know, it became cheaper, but it wasn't that we couldn't do it cheaper in-house. It just got better, and we were okay with that at the time.
Sounds like that's what Highland Park's trying to do too, right?
And
if it's financial, if their reasoning is purely financial.
And I don't know this. The speculation that I have heard from a few is that Highland Park may actually truly want to do it on their own. I don't know about the word want, but I don't think anyone at NSSED or on the governing board is viewing 112 as a negotiating strategy or a bluff. They seem to be serious about it.
Well, thank you, Mike, for all of this information. As Mr. Borkowski asked if we are interested in having someone from NSSCD speak here, could you please let Mr. Borkowski know? How about that? Thank you very much. And we are going to move on then to the Illinois Association of School Boards, that is EdRed, and Mr. Anderson is not here this evening. Mrs. Fowler, did he leave a report with you? Okay, there's no report then from EdRed. The Curriculum Coordinating Committee did meet on October 3rd, and I merely serve as a liaison here. Clearly, Lauren Fagel was the chair and did a wonderful job welcoming our new committee, comprised of teachers and community members. And most of our discussion, oddly enough, focused on the Common Core and the changes that are coming along with it. I know we sound like a broken record up here. One of the more interesting footnotes was that there has been some resistance met with the PARCC assessment, of which we are part of the consortium moving to the PARCC testing, PARCC, in lieu of NWA and or ISAT over the next year or two. There has been some resistance met there amongst some states, including Florida, but we do know that there are other options, including ACT Aspire. Certainly, we entrust ACT testing. And Smarter Balance is the other consortium that is creating tests as well. So we know that if we indeed do find that we are resistant also to PARCC, we have other places to go. That at this time has not been determined. We also focused on new materials that are being sought out for curriculum, especially nonfiction books for language arts. On the testing and throughout the Common Core, readings and comprehension from nonfiction reading is going to be a focus, which it really hasn't been in the past. This is not to say we are losing our novels. We are keeping them, and we are glad we are keeping them, but we are looking into nonfiction books for LA, and I believe Colleen Brueggemann is going to be piloting some books in the 2nd grade. Finally, we discussed learning targets, and this was interesting, because the handout giving on learning targets focused on it being important for students to understand what and why they're learning something. And in the same breath, our teachers are in the process of coming up with a formal scope and sequence to depict what exactly they are teaching and when. which is a big undertaking and a very important one. And Dr. Fagel was very, very wise to point out that although we would love this information today, we don't expect that it will be complete and available, which it will be, until the fall, because we want to respect the time and the experiences of the students that are in those teachers' classrooms right now. And until we can have the full focus of the teachers, which may be throughout the year, of course, but also focused on some summer work as well to complete the scope and sequencing of the curriculum. Very exciting project, very exciting. Lauren, did you want to add anything? Oh, well, congratulations. Tonight you are. All right. The next liaison report we have is Spirit of 67 Foundation. The Spirit of 67 met on October 8th at 9 a.m. Main takeaway from that is fundraising is up. And for instance, the last 2 years average, by late September, for the Spirit, the Spirit had raised $60,000. That was the average over the last 2 years. As of right now, late September, we are already at $86,000. Very, very exciting, and this was before the luncheon. And the luncheon was just held this past Friday, as Mike commented, and I did get to sit at a table with Mike and many other women, and it was a lovely afternoon. And I'm not going to give the numbers on the silent auction, but I will say that the rumor has it that it was a record-setting silent auction. So that kudos to our Spirit. And for those of you who are not aware, the Spirit of 67 is the fundraising arm of our district. All of the monies that are gained through the Spirit go back towards grants that go directly into the hands of our students in each and every classroom. So that is very, very exciting. And again, a thank you to the district for putting in the flyers in the registration packet so that people could join the Spirit early in the year, which really seemed to increase our numbers in membership. And thank you to administrators and teachers who mentioned the Spirit on curriculum nights throughout the district, as many people made donations that evening. This is my last liaison report. This is the APT meeting. I'm very fortunate that I get to attend these meetings. I really enjoy them. Incredible people who run these meetings and who help out on these committees. So the APT Executive Board met on October 9th at 9 a.m. and the guest speakers again were, we'll just call her Lauren Fagel. She's not a doctor anymore. Lauren Fagel and Lori Wilcox. And it was a remarkable discussion that the two of you shared, and I want to thank you for doing that. Not only did you talk about really what your goals were for the year and what the projects were that you were working on, but you really talked as mothers and as parents, as students, and I think that really resonated with a lot of the people in the room. So it was a wonderful discussion. Another thing that happened at the APT meeting that I'll remark on was that the teacher representative shared that, and this was without the two administrators in the room, I'll say that too. The teacher representative shared that even though there are many changes going on, and she didn't elaborate, but we can all infer from the Common Core and teacher evaluations that there is a positive vibe among teachers in our district during this time. So that is wonderful news. And that's it as far as liaison reports. Any other reports, and I know I'm going to ask Mrs. Clemenson to speak to the LASIK committee.
The LASIK team held their monthly meeting last night, and we were very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Tara Fortune from the Center for Advanced Research on Language Acquisition. And it was wonderful to have her inform the group on some of the latest research and trends in language acquisition. This was great for us as a team because when we last got together, we were brainstorming a lot of ideas around world language, and so now it was wonderful to have an industry expert there to help better inform our thinking. Her presentation was very fluid. I thought she reflected the needs of the group, answered a lot of questions, was very responsive. She shared practices on language acquisition from around the country as well as around the world. So I think that was really helpful for those of us there because she really had a broad worldview that informed her presentation. For example, she shared with us in Singapore that there's an expectation there that all students will be quadrilingual, I think I'm saying that correctly, 4 languages, and that all formal school instruction there is done in English. And then she jumped over and told us about a school in Texas that does 45% in English, 45% in Spanish. It's a full immersion program among those 2 languages, and then the remaining 10% is devoted to a 3rd language, like Mandarin or German, and then they tie that language in with physical activity. So, for example, if your 3rd language is Japanese, you'll couple that with karate instruction so that you're getting kind of those 2 things together, that whole mind-body connection to reinforce the language acquisition. So there's a lot of models out there, and it really depends on what the objectives of the program are. She presented a lot of great data. A couple of key things that I wrote down was that research shows that learning another language positively impacts test scores overall. So there's a lot of benefits to having world language beyond just the obvious one of learning another language, that kids who have world language instruction outperform their peers who do not. She also shared that there's really 2 key reasons for learning a world language. First, obviously you want to be able to learn and converse in another language, but the opportunity to learn about a culture outside of our own and really enhance your worldview. And she stressed that both of those objectives were quite vital. And then, not surprisingly, the research shows that the more time a student spends on studying a world language, the better and more progress they will make, moving from kind of a novice student to intermediate to advanced skills. And so therefore, if the goal is to be bilingual, then immersion programs typically do outperform the other methods because students are spending more time with the language and do some of their primary learning in that second language. So now that we kind of have all of this great knowledge at our fingertips, our goal for next month will be to start kind of putting the pieces together and formulate some ideas on what we might want to have future programs look like in our district. One thing that Dr. Fortune said at the very end of the presentation that kind of stuck with me is she said that if we're having trouble figuring out exactly what our world language program should look like, that's not unusual. She said immersion programs are hard, and there's really nothing easy about them. But she felt that they were well worth it, and she recommended taking one step at a time and moving forward, and I think that's what we're trying to do. So it was a good meeting.
That was a fantastic summary. I could have stayed home last night. But no, that was a fantastic summary. Yeah, she was very knowledgeable. One of the interesting facts that I walked away with, which I was surprised about, was that for all of the schools in the United States that have foreign language programs, 14% of them have immersion programs. And I was very surprised to hear that. So that was a surprising statistic, just like some of the ones you mentioned.
That's a lot higher than you expected, I assume.
Much.
Yeah.
Beth, I don't want to oversimplify what I thought I heard, but was she suggesting that creating an advanced language program at a younger age makes kids smarter?
I don't think she was going quite that far, but she was saying when you look at the data in different state-by-state tests, that when they compare matched sets between those that have a language acquisition program and those that don't, the kids who are taking a foreign language outperform the other kids who don't have the program on reading and math and general studies.
And was there any a delineation relative to the age in which they're exposed to a second language?
It's funny we talked about that because, of course, everything we have sort of heard is, you know, obviously more is better than less and younger is better than older. And she said that's not, the younger versus older is not always the case. There's obviously a lot of benefits for starting younger versus older, but she said that there are kids who have made just as much progress at those older ages because they are more mature learners, and so they have the study skills to really devote to language acquisition in a way maybe a kindergarten or first grader wouldn't have those same study skills. A lot of the advantages that kids have at the younger level, she said, are just, it's second nature, a willingness to try. They don't feel awkward or silly. There's a confidence in just kind of jumping in there with the language.
And did she provide any perspective on her experience across the country with other school districts, whether or not a school district of our size or diversity is better suited for a particular type of language program?
She really didn't get into that. She was more presenting different models. I mean, there's schools smaller than ours, like the school in Texas that does the 45-45-10 program is much smaller than ours. It's a single school. There's others in Minnesota that she shared, which are very large and pervasive. So she just presented a lot of kind of best practices from around the country, allowing us to kind of figure out what our goals are for moving forward.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Clemenson. All right, any other before we move on? Then we are going to go to the approval of creation of a special board committee on compensation policy, but we are taking that off the agenda for this evening, Mrs. Fowler. Thank you very much. Okay, and now we're going to move to the approval of the Human Resources Report. May I have a motion to approve the Human Resources Report as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. A roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemenson?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we are on to approval of consent agenda items. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented, including disbursements, payrolls, and financial statements from September 2013, minutes of a budget hearing, September 24th, 2013, minutes of a regular meeting, September 24th, 2013, minutes of an executive session, September 24th, 2013, and disposal of audio recordings from January 12th, 13th, 25th, 28th from 2012.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Clemenson?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Also have two FOIA requests for District 67. John Barron, United Union of Roofers, Waterproofers, and Allied Workers, Local 11, as well as the Illinois Department of Labor. A couple of important announcements. Tomorrow, Wednesday, October 23rd, late start day. We know the kids are already off and they're excited. They get to sleep in tomorrow. And our teachers get to engage in a fantastic emotional wellness program. So late start day for grades 5 through 8. School will begin at 10:35. Buses will run regularly, but exactly 2 hours later than they would pick you up. So exactly 2 hours later. Everything's 2 hours later. And school begins at 10:35 a.m., 2 hours later than usual. On Tuesday, November 19th, 2013, the Board of Education will resume here once again at 7 p.m. in the Lake Forest High School West Campus Boardroom. And may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Lake Forest District 67 Board of Education?
So moved.
Second.
Adjourned.